Hello. Today we'll be going over object-oriented programming. Now I'm using Java to show you the concepts of object-oriented programming, but no matter what object-oriented programming language you use, C++, Python, JavaScript, no matter what, the concept of object-oriented programming is the same. However, the only difference will be syntax. And so today we'll be going over how to make an object, then I'll be showing you how to use the object, and I might throw in a little bit of side information, a little bit of information on the side that might help you out. Alright, well, let's get started. So today we're going to be making an object, then I'm going to call it box. You might be more accurate to think of it as square, but box is easier to type. So I'm going to call it a square. Or a box, sorry. So whenever you're creating an object, you want to use the keyword class. That tells the compiler, hey, I'm making an object. And it's a box object. Okay. And so now now all objects have properties. And this is objects in real life. So like a box in real life has a length and a width. So I'm gonna create two properties of the box. And these are referred to as data members, or you might hear them referred to as fields also. Public int, and I'm gonna call this length, and public int width. Oops. Oh wow, I butchered that one. Okay. So now these look a little bit different than how you would normally declare variables. That's because they're not necessarily variables. They're properties of box. They belong to box. So a box has a length and a width. And you put public in front of them. I'll show you why I put public in front of them later, and I'll get a little bit more into that. But for now you can, if you're following along, you can just put that. It's all right. And so now, I'm willing to bet almost every object has a constructor, because constructors are really useful. You don't need them for an object to work, but they're just extremely useful. So, and to create a constructor, you will actually first I should tell you what the constructor does. The constructor will help you in other words construct the object, hence the name. So, because whenever you actually create the object, the constructor is called first. You could think of the constructor as a method, so the constructor method is called first, and then it will construct the object, and then it will let you use the object the way you want. And the way you create a constructor is public, using public, and then the name of the object or the class. So in this case, box. Then you can give it a parameter list. Now it can be empty, and you might hear that referred to as a default constructor. But I'm gonna give it parameters, int L, and int W. And then here, I'll explain this after I type it up. Okay, so now whenever I make a box, I have to pass it two integers. One will represent L, which is short for length, and the other, W, will represent the width. And I assign them accordingly in the body of the constructor. And so next we'll want to make accessor methods. Those are methods that will return the data. Will return the data the way the object wants it to be returned. So that way, this is important, because if you're working with a team, and you make this object, you don't want like Bill or Joe messing with your object in a way that you don't want them to, or messing with the data. So you want to make an accessor that will return the data the way you want it to be. And so the only data to return are integers, so the return type is an int. I'm gonna call this getLength. Oops. And in this case, we only need to return the length. There's no weirdness about it. Just return length. So in this case, it's very simple, but I think it's an important example. And so now this one also has public in front of it, just like these. You'll know, just like any other method you would have made inside with your main. You can make methods that are private. Those are useful if you want to break up the work that the object has to do, but you don't want outside stuff messing with it. I'll show an example of that later. So now this is an accessor, a very basic one, but it's an accessor. And so then we'll make what's called as a mutator, or you might hear it referred to as a setter. Hence its name, because we're going to name it set length. And then length equals L. Okay. This one's also public again. This is void because it doesn't need to return anything. The name of the method is setLength, and we pass an integer named L, which represents the new length. And that will change the length property up here to whatever we passed in. Okay. You can do the same thing with width. I'm not gonna do that because it's more or less gonna be the same thing. Just instead of width, instead of length and L, it'll be width and W. Okay, and so now that we've created the object, I'll show you how to use the object. So we have to create a variable for the object. The variable's type is the type of the object, because this thing's type is a box. So do box, and I'm going to name it B1. Okay. Now, just like any other variable, B1 has no value, so there's no constructor or anything called yet. But when I type new box, the new box part will call the constructor. However, if I try to compile this, it will give me an error because I need to pass it parameters. So I'm going to say it's a box of, length 12 and width 24. And that should compile. So now we have a box of length 12 and 24. And I can show you this. Oh, first thing I should show you how to use this object actually. So if I want to use the set length for this object, I will do b1.setLength, and then I'll give it a value. So let's say I don't want the length to be 12, I want it to be 10. I call b1.setLength. Now you do the b1 dot is because you want this box's length to be 10. If you just do set length, it's set length of, you can think of it as like what the set length of what. So you specify, I'm calling the set length method on this object, and then it'll manipulate the data. That becomes important the more you get into object-oriented programming. Now if I want to get the length to display it, you just get the system.out.print. And it's very similar. We use the accessor, or you also might hear it referred to as a getter. I like accessor better. So then you do b1.getLength. Here, I'll put this on a different line just for clarity. So now I'm calling b1.getLength, and then I'm printing it. Okay, and if I compile this, okay, and I run it, boom, our length is 10 because I changed it. Now if I get rid of this and run it, it'll be 12. Okay. And that's really the basics of object-oriented programming. Oh, one more thing I forgot to tell you. Since length is public, we can access the length value directly through the reference name. So in that case, the reference name would be b1. So in this case, I don't even have to use .getLength. I can just use .length. Oh, oops, I forgot to get rid of these. And it'll do the same thing. Just to show you, 12. Did the same thing as the last one. So you may think, why even bother using getLength? Because actually, most of the time, you won't leave this public. you want to leave it private. So now if I try to do that, I get an error. Length has private access in box. So I can't just use b1.length. I have to use get length. And then this does the same thing. This is important because if you do, I only have to use .set length. I could just use .length. So what happens if I set the length to a negative number? Boxes can't have negative numbers. However, if a negative number was passed into set length, I could create an if statement that says if L is less than 0, then then set length to 0. So that way you don't have to deal with negative numbers. It allows the data to be manipulated. Doing it this way allows the data to be manipulated in the way that you want, which is important. Now that's pretty much the basics of object-oriented programming, but you might be asked to create a toString in some of your classes, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so this is a toString. This is what is referred to as a toString method. They're a little bit different, and I'll show you how. And so they're basically toStrings will return a string representation of the object. And I'll show you what that means. I'm going to type this up and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So this is what is in my toString. This is a string representation of the current state of the object. In other words, this is a string that basically will tell the user or the class or the whatever that is using this object what's currently going on in the string, or what's currently going on in the object as a string. And the way you use that is like any other method. You can do b1.toString and it will return this string in its place. However, what's interesting about the toString method is you can just do system.out.print, and then you can just print the reference to the object, and boom, it'll print it. And that has to do, the further along you get in Java, you'll understand why, but it has to do with something called object hierarchy, which is beyond the scope of this video. And can't really think of anything else that would be useful, any other side notes that would be useful. So I think I'll end the video here. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you again in another video.